What's going on, everybody? I am back with a new episode for the month of August. I know for movie talk, I haven't really been doing as much like I wanted to do, but that's because I've been busy with the other podcasts. Hopefully, you guys been checking out um Every Ring all at once, and also now just started Lantern. So I really wasn't focused too much on movie talk, but I did want to get back into the swing of things with a movie talk episode, and here I am talking about the movie Alligator.
Now, it's the reason why I kind of decided to go with this movie because this was a movie that I used to watch a lot as a kid. If you've heard me talk about growing up as a kid on the podcast before, or if you're a new listener hearing this for the first time, I used to watch a lot of the Sunday matinee films that used to come on Fox on Sundays. And this movie, along with the sequel, Alligator 2, The Mutation, would come on quite a bit. And I don't know, it's just something about these movies that I usually get a kick out of. And I don't know, I just like creature features and everything. And this was kind of the movie that I thought of first when I started kind of going through the list of movies I want to do for this month. But yeah, like I said, I used to watch it a lot as a kid and everything, and I always enjoyed it, and it never freaked me out. I don't know, the thought of a giant, alligator that lives in the sewer potentially eating people, it never freaked me out to the standpoint. I mean, I'm gonna get into it later as I kind of talk a little bit about the movie. There is one particular scene in this movie that did used to freak me out, and kind of still do freak me out even as an adult, because something like that could actually happen. I mean, it's not as bad as, when you was a kid and you would go in a swimming pool and you would be like, a shark was going to get you, because like there's no way in hell that a shark would be in a goddamn pool, especially without you being able to see it, just looking into the pool. But there is a particular scene in this movie that still kind of haunts me a little bit, and like I say, it actually could happen to a degree, especially the fact that I live in Florida, so alligators ended up in a swimming pool. It's not too far-fetched. So before actually getting into talking about the movie, just want to give the synopsis as well as go through the cast and everything. So gonna go with hopefully this synopsis makes sense. This is off of IMDb, and basically a pet baby alligator is flushed down a toilet and survives in the city sewers. 12 years later, it grows to an enormous size thanks to a diet of discarded laboratory dogs injected with growth hormones. Now humans have entered the menu. I mean, it is pretty much kind of what happens throughout the course of this movie. I mean, there is a lot of underlining stuff also that goes on in this movie, but for the most part, that is what kind of goes on in this movie, really. In our cast, we have Robert Forster as David Madison, Robin Riker as Marissa Kendall, Michael V. Garza, aka Frank Pantangeli from The Godfather Part 2, as Chief Clark, Dean Yeager as Slade, Sidney Lassick as Luke, and also rounding out the cast of main characters, we have Henry Silva as Colonel Brock, and it was directed by Louis Teague. And you're probably like, who the hell is Louis Teague? Well, Louis Teague actually is known for making quite a few really good movies, actually. This one being one of them. He also did a little movie that came out in 1983 called Cujo, followed by Cat's Eye. So he did two Stephen Kings back to back. He did The Jewel of the Nile, which is not as good as Romancing the Stone, but I mean, if you like Romancing the Stone and you just wanted to see the sequel, Jewel of the Nile, it's like I said, it's not as good, but it still has its moments. He did Navy SEALs in 1990, another movie that I actually covered on the podcast. An underrated movie, Wedlock, in 1991, which starred Rutger Hauer. He directed an episode of one of my favorite TV shows growing up as a kid, Time Tracks, and everything. And that is kind of the last big thing. He kind of did some TV stuff. He directed a few episodes of Nash Bridges. and everything. But I would say that Wedlock was like the last movie of note that he really did in 1991, and he hasn't done anything as a director since 2010. But I've always kind of liked the film. Like the films I've seen of his, I've always liked the stuff that he's done. And like I say, he's not a name that just jumps out at you like a big name, but he has directed a few things that are very noteworthy. So getting into this movie. So movie kicks off in 1968 where we see a little girl and her family. They was on vacation down in Florida and they got a pet baby alligator, and they go back to Chicago and everything. The dad, he gets kind of pissed off and is like, "You're not having that thing here," and everything. So he takes it and he flushes it down the toilet, and we see it go down the toilet and down into the sewers. And then we fast forward 12 years later, because one thing about this movie is that it has that whole urban legend thing about alligators living in the sewers type thing. So that's basically kind of where this movie kind of gets its premise for. Like, well, there's an alligator living in the sewer that grows to be enormous, right? And it is a Jaws ripoff in a sense. But we fast forward 12 years later and we're introduced to David Madison, played by Robert Forster, who's a cop. And what's funny about this movie with him is that there's like a running gag about the fact that he has like a receding hairline and he got like hair plugs. Not so much that he has a toupee, but it's like plugs and everything. And a couple people make references, oh, it looks nice and everything. And it's funny how this joke also comes back some years later in Jackie Brown, which stars him. And it's kind of the same running joke in that also, and everything. So like I say, we're introduced to him. And Robert Forster actually is really good in this movie. He's very intense, and I mean, even though he's supposed to be the Chief Brody character, because like I say, Jaws ripoff, but he's a little bit more, I won't say forthright with a lot of his decision making, but I kind of wish they would have had this thing like he had a thing against alligators, kind of like how Brody had the thing against going into the water. If they had a thing, if there was a if Madison had this thing against alligators, he would have basically had to overcome his fear of dealing with this creature once it, rears its ugly head, basically. So we see where he is, he's going around and he goes to this pet shop because you're starting to kind of hear like rumblings of, there's being these workers are being killed and everything, and they start investigating. They're trying to figure out what the hell is going on here. But also too, there's all these like random body parts of pets around too. So he goes to the local pet shop, and that's where he kind of talks to the guy who works the sleazy shop owner and trying to figure out what's going on and everything. And we find out that the shop owner actually is a part of this bigger experimental hormone gene kind of ring that's going on. And he's basically going around, he's been stealing pets from people, and it's kind of alluded to that he might have stole David Madison's dog a while ago and everything, because through a conversation that the two guys had, it was like, yeah, he might have stole his pet. And it's never brought up again. But we see where, because the character's name is Luke, and for anyone who's known who Sidney Lassick is, he probably is best known for being like the scary older dude in Silver Bullet when the search party goes out into the fog, and he's like, I think it's in here with us and everything, and that's when the thing shows up and kills everybody, and Lawrence Tierney gets beat to death with his own bat, which is ironically similar to what happens in Halloween Kills with Tommy Doyle and old Huckleberry the bat, and what happens with him. But anyway, so Luke, he, after the whole conversation with Madison, we kind of stick with Luke for a while, and he's taking one of the discarded laboratory, experiments that's all wrapped up. He's taking them down and dumping them into the sewer. And while he's down there, he ends up getting got by the freaking alligator. So he becomes a victim himself. And again, Madison is on the case, and like I said, where the hell is all these damn body parts is coming from? Because at first they kind of thinking that maybe it's a serial killer that's going around, killing people and just dumping body parts in the freaking sewer, which could have been a possibility, and everything. But this killer happens to be this freaking giant alligator. So, Chief Clark, played by Frank Fantansley, because that's what I'm calling him, Frank Fantansley, he basically he okay, we need to figure out what exactly is going on here, and we know that it is basically a creature. We know that. So they kind of dispute the whole potentially a serial killer thing of a person, at least. It's a creature. So Frank Fantansley, he ends up taking Madison to meet Marissa Kendall. Now, the interesting thing about the whole Marissa Kendall thing, the character of Marissa, is that she is the little girl from the opener that had this alligator, this baby alligator. It was a little teeny lizard-sized alligator, and named her Roman and everything. And only if you watch the movie, you know that it's the same character. But in the movie context, they never make reference to the fact that she's the same girl who owned the alligator. They got flushed down the toilet. And I don't know why they didn't make the connection between the two, but they don't. But in this case, she is the Hooper character, because she's the one who studies the alligators and knows all about them and everything like that. So she's like Hooper in this sense. So they kind of, hit it off and everything. And Madison, he kind of putting the charm on her a little bit and everything. But they realize, we got to kind of stay professional at the same time as we're going on this hunt for this beast. So one of the things that another running theme in this movie is also too is how Madison is very unlucky with his partners, his cop partners, because apparently there was a whole situation that happened with him in St. Louis that gets brought up a few times, where his partner was killed, and that's kind of been haunting him for years also. So he's kind of dealing with that on top of, now trying to catch whatever the hell this thing is that's down in the sewers. Because at this point, we don't know that it's an alligator. At least they don't. We as the audience do, but the viewers don't know. I mean, the characters in the movie don't know it specifically that it's an alligator, but we as the viewer, we do know, and everything. But yeah, like I say, the whole thing about whatever happened in St. Louis haunts him. And you have this tabloid reporter of Thomas Kemp, who's basically hounding Madison. Okay, the press conference that they hold, they're talking about the whole thing about, the creature and everything. Kemp, he got a bust up. Well, Madison, why don't you talk about what happened in St. Louis? What the fuck does that have to do with anything? Even Frank Fantansley looks like that ain't got nothing to do with what we talking about here. So he's kind of hounding him and everything. But one thing that really happens in the movie that kind of even throws David even more into, even more of depression, is that he decides to go down into the sewer, but he doesn't want to go down there alone. So he ends up getting the young cop, Kelly. It's hey, you got any, you got any type of boost and everything? I can get some. So he ended up getting him. Kelly, he's this little fast talking, young cop, very brash and everything. So they end up going down in the sewer because they trying to find, okay, what the hell exactly is down here? Maybe we can find it. Maybe we can kill it, type of thing. So they end up down there, and then they find out that this thing is huge as hell. It's almost like a dinosaur. And they try to escape, and they get to this, manhole and everything, and they trying to get out. And right before they're able to get out, the alligator comes up and it grabs Kelly by the leg and it snatches him away and takes him. So on top of the whole St. Louis incident, Madison now feels very responsible for the death of Kelly and everything. So he's starting to kind of go into a depression and doesn't really know like if he should be doing what he's doing type of thing. He just really messed up. And then on top of that, you got freaking Kemp that's still on his freaking back because he just jumps at the opportunity. Oh, you lost your partner in St. Louis. Now you done lost another partner here. Like, how do you feel about that, Madison? And everything. It's like, what the fuck are your problem? But Kemp, he decides to go digging around in the sewers because he overhears them talking about, about the alligator down in the sewers, and nobody want to believe it. Because they're like, like he's crazy or something. Like, damn alligator down in the sewers, you making this up. Maybe you killed Kelly. That's what some people's even thinking, right? So Kemp, he decides to go snooping around down in the sewers himself. And he starts to find, he's looking around. He's probably thinking like, oh shit, I think Madison might be on to something. While he's down there looking around, the alligator shows up and it attacks him. And in the process of attacking him, as he's being eaten by this thing, he actually takes pictures. He's flashing away at this thing as it's eating on him and everything. And so as he gets killed, they end up finding his camera and they develop the pictures and they find out, oh, Madison wasn't lying. There really is a freaking alligator down there. Kemp found out, he fucked around and found out the hard way that there is one down there. So this becomes a whole news frenzy and everything about this killer alligator down in the sewers. Everybody be careful, blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of funny how the fact that Kemp is like the biggest detractor of Madison, but in his death, he actually helps Madison, which is kind of funny and ironic in a way. So after that, the whole city now is in turmoil. I mean, everybody's kind of panicking, and then it becomes an all-out manhunt for this freaking alligator. So you got all the cops, the SWAT team, and everybody, looking for going down into the sewers trying to find this thing. They can't seem to find it. This thing is huge. It's like 36 feet or whatever. That's what it's supposed to be, right? And this thing manages to give them the slip. It disappears on them. David, looking like, what the hell? Everybody is like pissed off that they can't find the thing. So what do they decide to do? Well, they blame David Madison for the whole thing, and he ends up getting suspended because they couldn't find the freaking creature. So now he's kind of out, out in the wind and everything. And the captain, he had nothing to, his hands was kind of tied because he gets pressure from the mayor, who was getting pressure from Slade, who we find out Slade is the guy who's actually funding this whole hormone, illegal hormone experiments on these pets that are getting dumped down into the sewers, and the alligator was feeding on them, and that's why he grew to this enormous size. So yeah, it even has a little bit of a political type of intrigue, that's going on in it with that whole aspect where you got this illegal stuff going on. So the gator gets pissed, basically. That's how I look at it. The gator gets pissed because got all these people coming down to his home now. And it's like, all right, fine. Y'all want to come down to my home? I'm going to come up to your home. So one night, while these kids are out playing in the street, they start to hear this banging, and it's like it's shaking the ground. They're trying to figure out what the hell is going on. So the ground cracks open, and the gator comes up. He basically like, surprise, type of thing. And he's walking down the street. And what's funny about this is that you can tell that you can tell when it's the fake gator because it's an animatronic. And then like some of the wide shots, they have like a normal sized gator walking down the street, and you can tell the difference. But this is 1980. They was doing the best they could with what they had. And similar to Jaws, the animatronic did not work all the time, so they kind of had to, do some movie magic stuff. But it's all still, tongue in cheek, and you're supposed to take it as serious as you want to. If you start looking at all the cracks in the special effects, then yeah, you kind of take yourself out of it. But so the gator, it pops up, and it ends up killing a cop and everything in the street. So, like I said, it's a cop killer now. And then, he kind of shimmies off somewhere and he disappears. And people trying to figure out, well, where the hell did it go? Which is ironic. Like, how the hell did this thing disappear? Like, it's huge, but it disappears. It gives people the slip. So while everybody's out looking for it, we end up at this kids party, and you got these 3 kids, and the 2 kids has the one younger kid, has him blindfolded, takes him outside to the pool, and they turn on the pool light, and we see that the alligator's in the water, and the little kid with the blindfold, he actually sees it because the blindfold is not covering his eyes all the way, so he looks down, he sees the freaking thing, he's like, no, don't do it. They push him in the pool. Next thing you know, the pool starts filling up with blood because freaking alligator now has killed the kid. So he's like so basically this kid is like the Alex Kittner kid from Jaws that gets got, basically. They all freak out, and it becomes even more of a huger thing now that the creature, it came up out of the sewers, it killed the cop, it killed the little kid. So what does Chief Clark decide to do? They bring in like this, he's the Quint-ish character, but I feel like he's worse than Quint because Henry Silver's like a piece of shit in this movie. He comes in, Colonel Brock, he's, like this alpha male, like, hey, baby, and everything like this, even hitting on Marissa and everything, and it's like, ugh, like, sleazy fucker, like, what's wrong with you? But he thinks he's hot shit because, he's a big game, hunter and everything, but he ain't never had to hunt nothing like this. So I thought it was kind of funny how they introduced the Brock character. You think, oh, he gonna come in, like I said, he's gonna be like Quint. He's gonna be, leading the charge now, even though Madison is out the way, but Brock now is gonna kind of lead the charge and everything to catch the beast. Well, again, talk about fucking around and finding out. Well, he out for some reason. I feel like a lot of his stuff was cut because why he's out drinking, I have no idea. He's walking down the street with this big ass rifle. He's out drinking. So he comes up on these kids and he pays them to go down this alley. He basically got them showing him around. And they thinking that the thing is down this alley. So Brock, he decides to go down. The kid's like, I don't know if you should go down there, man. Like, he's like, I got this. So he goes, shuffling down the alley and everything. He's looking for the creature and everything. And it pops up out of the garbage on him. And he gets a round off. But the kids, they trying to figure out what the hell is going on down there. So they go look, and this scene is always kind of freaky to me because when they come around the corner, they see where he's literally inside the shark. There I go again, saying the shark. The alligator's mouth, his feet kicking and everything, and he's screaming. And the one kid tries to run up, grab the rifle, and gonna try to shoot, and everything. He can't really get it to work. He drops the rifle. They take off running, and it's the super cut of going back and forth with the kids running away as the alligator is swallowing Colonel Brock. And it just kind of, for some reason, that scene sticks with me. Well, that scene and when the little kid gets got in the pool, those are the 2 scenes that kind of have stuck with me over the years. Like whenever I think about this movie, those 2 scenes, the Colonel Brock one, like I say, is just the way they do it. And because I guess it's the whole thing about, the fear of being eaten alive, because he literally is eaten alive and everything. Couldn't happen to a better guy. I mean, I say that. It couldn't happen to a better guy because, like I said, his character was dirt worse than this. But unlike Quint, he's not as cool as Quint. Like I say, he's just an arrogant asshole, and he did get what he kind of deserved, really, if you ask me. So now that Brock is out of the way because he got killed, and the Gator's still on this rampage warpath of them, disrupting his solace, his peace and everything. He was cool. He was down in the sewers. He was getting fed every couple of days, and then was like when people decided to come down there to get fed even more. So he was, he was living good. But then when all these other people started to come down there and basically pushed him out of his home, he was like, payback, type of thing. So the Gator, he ends up going to this freaking party where Slade, the mayor, even the scientist that's over the illegal hormone experiment thing is, and he just started wrecking the shit out of this place. I mean, he's slapping people with his tail, beating the hell out of people, eating a couple of people. He kills the mayor. He kills the scientist, and he kills Slade. He actually beats the limo that Slade is in down so bad that the man gets crushed to death. Like I said, he just go on a full rampage. And it's funny, like he literally bites the hand that was literally feeding him, and everything, which is funny. So after all this happened, everyone is really, in panic mode. So David, ends up, him and Marissa, they end up, getting together again. And it's like, okay, we got to figure something out. So they're basically like, okay, if we can lure it back down into the sewer and set some charges, we can actually blow this thing up, and then that'll be the end of it. So David is down in the sewer. Marissa, she goes to the point where he's supposed to come up out of the sewer to meet her at this manhole. So she's waiting for him there. David is down in the sewer. They get the alligator back down to the sewer. He's getting to the point where he's supposed to come up out the manhole, but some jackass in a car comes there and parks on top of it. So time becomes, like the crunch, like in a lot of movies like this, time of the essence and everything. We got to really push it and everything. So she's trying to get this guy to move his truck and everything. And Madison's like, he's freaking out because, like, if he don't get up soon enough, he's going to die down there too. So the truck finally moves and he comes up out the manhole. Well, no, he had to actually go to a different spot. That's right. And so she had to end up meeting him at a different spot. So he literally comes up out the manhole like mere seconds before the damn thing explodes. It blows up everything underground. The alligator gets blown to pieces down there. And they saved the day. They saved the city from the menacing alligator. And, everybody's congratulating Madison. Him and Marissa, I assume they continue a relationship and everything after this. And that's how it ends for them. But we get this last little thing at the end of the movie where it's like a full circle type thing where we see a new baby alligator that gets flushed down into the sewer. And it's like, Alligator 2, the mutation. That's what comes. Well, of course, that comes years later. But that's how the movie ends, with the little stinger of the circle is gonna come back around. We got rid of one, a new one's coming. But yeah, that's pretty much the movie Alligator. This is a short episode, and everything. Let's say just kind of getting back into the groove of doing things. If I had to rate this movie, for me personally, like I say, this is a childhood favorite of mine. I give it a solid 4 out of 5. Like I say, I just enjoy it for what it is. It's a movie that you shouldn't take too seriously. Like I say, it's a nice, time killer, nice Jaws ripoff, because you're getting a lot of those around that time, and everything. And it's one, like I say, I revisit every so often, and I actually bought the special edition of this. And one of the ironic things about this movie is that Bryan Cranston from Breaking Bad actually worked as a production assistant on this movie, and he's actually on the special features and everything. Because what's ironic too is that the first job that Bryan Cranston had was this movie, and then years later he works with Robert Forster on one of the last things that Robert Forster did before he passed away, was on the last episodes of Breaking Bad, when he's the handler who picks up, his character and Walter White and Saul, and hold him at that little safe house where they take him off to wherever he's going and everything. So it's kind of interesting, like, that's the whole connection with Bryan Cranston, also the connection with Breaking Bad, and the fact that this was one of the first movies that he worked on as a production assistant. And then we looked to see what Bryan Cranston went on to become also. And I thought it was cool too that he actually, showed up and actually talked about this movie on the special features, because he didn't have to. Because some actors, when they they do stuff when they were younger. Sometimes, well, for a long time, Kevin Bacon, but especially like Jennifer Aniston when it comes to Leprechaun. They try not to talk about their earlier career dealing with horror films, whether they were on camera or even working behind the scenes. But Bryan Cranston, he took the time to actually, show up and talk about his time working on this film, which I think is dope. That when people, they don't run away, well, I should say, run away, don't want to acknowledge the past of their earlier career, and everything. And like I say, he didn't have to, because he wasn't an important part of this movie, like, and everything, but he was just a production assistant. But the fact that he took the time out, with him being the star that he is now, and actually sit and talk about his time working on this movie, I think it's dope that, he did that and everything. If I had to pick a favorite character, I think by default it is Robert Forster as Madison. I mean, I would say if Frank Pentangeli was in the movie a little bit more, he'd probably be my favorite character, because, like I say, anytime I see him in a movie, no matter what he's in, he's always Frank Pentangeli. Even though in this he's a little bit more reserved, unlike him in Fear City, where he's just kind of like alt-world Frank Pentangeli in that. But here he's a little bit more reserved, I guess, because he's the chief, of police and everything, so he's a little bit more calmer and everything. But he probably would have been my favorite if he had more scenes in the movie.
And I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode. Of course, you can follow me all over social media, whether it's on Threads at The J Giles, on Instagram at JMT Podcast. You can follow the TV Zone Podcast Network on Instagram also the Facebook group page, TV Zone Podcast Network. Of course, all of the J Movie Talk episodes is part of the TV Zone Podcast Network, wherever you listen to your podcast at. But if you just singularly want to listen to Movie Talk, we're also on YouTube. So in case you've been listening on YouTube, definitely comment down below what your thoughts are about the movie Alligator, and everything like that. And maybe sometime soon, I might be doing the sequel, Alligator 2, The Mutation, because I do have some thoughts about that movie as well. So thank everyone again for listening to this episode, and I will catch you guys next time. Peace.